remark has been received. Edie, and then we'll...
Another follow-up on Myanmar. We heard what Special Envoy Shana Bergener is doing. What has the Secretary General himself been doing on Myanmar? Has he tried to talk to any of the generals? Has he been talking to leaders in the region?
Yes, he has been spending over the last week or so, spending quite a bit of time on the phone, speaking to members of, focusing on members of ASEAN, including the current presidency of ASEAN, which is Brunei, and he has spoken also since the coup to permanent representatives and foreign ministers from member states who've had who've shown interest in this, and obviously members of the Security Council. So his focus has really been on trying to unite the international community to speak with one voice on this issue and to overturn, obviously, the actions by the military and restore democracy.
And a follow-up on the events team in Libya. Do you know if they're planning to travel? Because in the Secretary General's announcement, I believe that he thought that they should be based in Sirte. Are they planning to travel from Tripoli, and how long are they planning to stay?
For two challenges in terms of the amount of information we can share. First and foremost is the security of this team. They will go where they need to go, given the security and COVID constraints. I think right now they've just landed. They will do whatever they need to do to present a strong and clear assessment to the mission leadership, and then on to the Secretary General. Yes, go ahead, and then Sylvia.
I have two questions on Iraq. The first one, last night, the 10 rockets landed a military base that's housing U.S. forces. A contractor passed away. Any reaction to this attack just less than a week after the U.S. rocket attacks in Syria? And it comes 2 days before Pope Francis visited.
Of course. Obviously, Secretary General is following the developments in Iraq, including the rocket attack, very slowly. He remains very concerned about the volatile situation in that region. And I think it's important for all sides to exercise restraint, avoid any escalation, which would undermine the ongoing diplomatic efforts at finding peace and lowering the tensions in that region. And we, of course, all very much hope for a successful and safe visit of the pontiff to Iraq.
And again, on Iraq, about the sides lowering tension. One side is, we don't hear the name of, is Iran, and today the Kurdistan regional government published confession of people who conducted the attacks 2 weeks ago on Erbil, and they said we got the rockets from Iran. And I want to finish my question. I mean, the Iranian militias told us to do this attack. This is the first time, basically, what the Iraqi authorities say concrete evidence comes out of Iran's involvement. Why not naming Iran?
Look, there are a lot of parties that need to hear this message of de-escalation. It includes various armed groups operating in Iraq outside of the control of the state, and obviously powers both regionally and internationally all need to work towards the de-escalation. Sorry, Celia and then Toby.
Stefan, could we have an update on the status of the investigation?
Sure. The UN's team's work is ongoing. Our colleagues in DSS are doing a review of the security, and obviously we are at the disposal and are working closely with both the Congolese and the Italian authorities in their criminal investigations. I will share with you the name, the contact from my colleague Greg Barrow at WFP, who is speaking for the UN on the investigation. Tobias.
Thank you. That is my full name. My question is, now that there's a UN team on the ground in Libya, is that an indication that foreign fighters have left or are leaving? Is that a positive indication of that? And I have a second question on Tigray.
No, I think let me just say, we were not waiting for all foreign fighters to leave Libya to send the advanced team. So this is the arrival of this advanced team overnight is an operational issue. We're trying to operationalize the request of the Security Council. They will be there to assess the situation and how we can best support what is a Libyan institution, which is the ceasefire monitoring commission. Your other question.
And just an update on access for humanitarian efforts in Tigray.
Nothing major, no positive major developments to report. Abdelhamid. Abdelhamid?
Yes, thank you, Stefan. I want to take you back to 2019 former Commissioner General of the UNRWA was accused of misbehavior, mismanagement, nepotism, etc. I mean, there was a report that was innocent. And I quote Mr. Crandall, who said in a recent interview, he said, the Secretary General called me in November 2019 to let me know that the charges of corruption, fraud, mismanagement, and romantic relations with a female member of the staff have all been dropped. So, in this interview, there are two questions, and I want to ask you. I ask these two questions, not on behalf of them, but as a journalist. First, will there be an official authority issued with the UN in this example? Second, why the report has not been published in full? Thank you.
Look, I'm looking for my notes on this. What I can, first of all, tell you is that the report by OIOS will be shared the report by OIS, which is an internal procedure, has been shared, is being shared at the request of member states, and that's the usual procedure. But I will answer your question in writing a little bit in a moment. Evelyn.
Thank you, Steph. You mentioned earlier that the Secretary General had spoken to ASEAN and other countries on Myanmar. Has he also asked India and China to use their influence on that country?
He has spoken to a number of regional countries and asked them to do whatever they can do to help correct the situation and support the Myanmar people's call for a return to democracy. Okay, I will leave it at that and leave you in Brendan's good hands. Give me 2 seconds to liberate this podium, Brendan.
Good afternoon. I'll start with Myanmar. The president said this morning that he was horrified by new reports of protesters being shot and killed by security forces in Myanmar. He noted that last week, the General Assembly came together in a show of solidarity with the people of Myanmar as they struggle to assert their civil rights. He said the international community is still watching. This morning, the General Assembly plenary adopted by consensus a resolution introduced by the Russian Federation on the role of diamonds in fueling conflict. In remarks on this topic, the President said that conflict diamonds continue to be a matter of serious international concern. He added that these tiny pieces of carbon can have a devastating impact on peace, human rights, and security in diamond-producing countries. In that regard, he called on member states to continue working to curb the flow and impact of conflict diamonds. He added that the Kimberley process, a unique arrangement between governments, the diamond industry, and civil society, has helped the situation and shows what we can achieve when we work together. This morning, the plenary adopted by consensus 2 new resolutions on argania and millets. By the first resolution introduced by Morocco, the Assembly proclaimed 10 May as the International Day of Argania. It will be observed annually, and among other things, the day will highlight the argan tree's role in achieving sustainable development. By the second resolution introduced by India, the Assembly declared 2023 as the International Year of Millets. The idea is to raise awareness of and direct policy attention to the nutritional and health benefits and other aspects of millet consumption. This morning, the plenary also adopted by consensus resolutions related to cooperation between the UN and the Council of Europe, and cooperation between the UN and the International Fund for Saving the Aral Sea. It also adopted a resolution on cooperation between the UN and the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons by a vote of 109 in favor to 3 against, with 11 abstentions. And finally, today is World Wildlife Day. This year's theme is Forests and Livelihoods, Sustaining People and Planet. The day was proclaimed by the General Assembly in 2013. In a video message, the President said, "Our world's forests are both beautiful and bountiful. They offer us rich biodiversity and cleaner air." And that is it from me. Are there any questions? Go ahead, Tobias.
Thank you.
Are we calling you that now?
Sure,
Okay.
I go by both. That's fine. I just want to follow up on something from yesterday that, and I know the nomenclature is important here, but in terms of prospective candidates that are now being circulated, is the number 3, or is the including the Secretary General as the only actual candidate now, or is the number 2?
Well, right now, there is only one candidate in the sense that that one name has been jointly circulated by both presidents, the presidents of the General Assembly and Security Council, to all member states. That one name is Antonio Guterres of Portugal. As the president tweeted earlier this week, he did send 2 additional names, which basically are signed letters plus CVs, just to the president of the Security Council. Abdulhamid, go ahead, please. Abdulhamid, I can't hear you.
I'm myself. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now, Brendan?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yesterday there was a meeting in Syria, as you know. I went to the meeting coverage page to see the summary of that meeting and you will find it. Is there a reason that it doesn't come within 24 hours, the meeting coverage, or what is the explanation?
Right.
Why is there no
As far as I know,
meeting coverage yesterday?
as far as I know, that meeting was an informal meeting of the General Assembly, which means that there would not normally be a summary prepared by meetings coverage. I can double check on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the reason, because normally when briefings are done, that's done in an informal setting in the General Assembly.
What they mean informal, it is President of the airport for this meeting, and we had 2 briefers in the same.
Basically, when there is a meeting, Abdulhamid, sorry, usually when there is a meeting which involves a briefing, like for example, when the Special Envoy on Myanmar recently briefed the General Assembly, that briefing mode is an informal one, and that's why it's considered an informal meeting, and that's why meetings coverage would not normally cover that in a press release form. Rick, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I have a question about the Myanmar diplomatic representation at the UN. I'm a little confused there. Stefan just said earlier that that these diplomatic notes from the permanent representative and the deputy were circulated by the Credentials Committee for all member states. From what I'm seeing on Facebook, that the deputy permanent representative was appointed by the junta in Myanmar to represent Myanmar. It's now resigned. So, like, are we operating with outdated information here? Can you help clarify anything?
Well, I note that Stefan just answered a question on this in his briefing, which just ended. So I wouldn't have anything to add to what he said. Just, I mean, to reiterate that it's really up to member states to communicate to UN protocol about who represents them. So right now, I saw the same news that you saw about the deputy ambassador from Myanmar. But that's not a matter for the office of the president of the General Assembly. That's really a matter between a member state and the UN protocol. And then, you know, the Credentials Committee, as I've informed you, I don't speak for them. They're a group of 9 member states headed by Tanzania. So I think I would direct any questions about further action by the Credentials Committee directly to them. Evelyn, go ahead, please.
Thanks much, Steph. Quick question. Where there's one final report on conflict diaries?
Sorry, say it again, Evelyn.
Yes, where does one find the report on conflict diaries that the PJ spoke about?
So today, what was done is a resolution was adopted in the General Assembly plenary, and then the president, he made remarks. So both of those are available online. So for the president's remarks, those are on the president's website, un.org/PGA. Just go to documents and then speeches. And then for the actual resolution, if you want to see that, that's in the journal. You can click on the link there.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
That's the end? Motherfucker, eh?
The VTC meeting of the Security Council is called to order. I should like to take this opportunity to pay tribute and on behalf of the Council to Her Excellency Ms. Barbara Woodward, Permanent Representative of the United Kingdom, for her service as the President of the Council for the month of February. I'm sure I speak for all members of the Council in expressing deep appreciation to Ambassador Woodward and her team for the great diplomatic skills with which she concluded the Council's business last month. The provisional agenda for this meeting is reports of the Secretary General on the Sudan and South Sudan. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Mr. David Shira, Special Representative of Secretary General for South Sudan and Head of the United Nations Mission in South Sudan, and Ms. Jacqueline Masiwa, Founder and National Director, Center for Inclusive Governance, Peace, and Justice. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document X/2021/172, the report of the Secretary General on South Sudan. I now give the floor to Mr. David Shira.
Thank you, Madam President, and my pleasure to have the opportunity to brief you today on the situation in South Sudan. Last week marked the first anniversary of the transitional government in South Sudan, and we've made some positive steps forward. The Presidency and the Council of Ministers have been formed, the full complement of state-level leaders is in place, and lower-level officials have been announced. Overnight, the President delegated power to the governors of all 10 states. These are welcome steps, but after a year, progress has been slow. The Transitional National Legislature still waits to be reconstituted, and there's been minimal progress on constitution making, transitional justice, and economic reform. Most significantly, unifying forces is yet to occur despite multiple self-imposed government deadlines. Thousands of troops fester in cantonment sites without adequate shelter, health care, and food. Slower implementation comes at a cost. The power vacuum at the local level has opened opportunities for spoilers and national actors who have exploited local tensions and fueled violence. We saw the impact of that in Jonglei last year. Today in Warrap, there is a worrying surge in violence between various heavily armed community militia that government forces are yet to contain. For the moment, conflict in the Equatorians has diminished. Meanwhile, reconciliation initiatives in Jonglei has reduced violence to an occasional outbreak. The cost is also borne in humanitarian terms. Subnational conflict combined with the devastation of flooding has created places of critical need like Jonglei and in Warrap. Humanitarian agencies are providing critical assistance despite 9 aid workers losing their lives last year while courageously carrying out this work. It's estimated that most of the country requires food aid. More encouragingly, the latest FAO assessment shows a year-on-year increase in cereal production and a marked lift in land cultivated to levels last seen in 2016. Across the country, UNRWA continues to protect and support South Sudanese in need, despite many challenges. Our engineers from 7 different countries are exploiting the dry season to build and improve 3,200 kilometres of road, including between Bor and Pibor, which we hope will aid reconciliation between Mole and Dinka and Nil communities. Work on a road linking the Sudan border to Bentiu and south to Rumbek is aimed to increase trade and prosperity for citizens in the impoverished areas it passes through. I can't overstate the tangible impact of this work. It is an often overlooked legacy of our peacekeeping that in a country of just 400 kilometres of paved road, improving roads boosts communication, increases trade, jobs, and most critically, it builds peace through linking communities. The follow-on from the redesignations of the Bor, Rao, and Juba POC sites has continued smoothly. Camp residents, for example, initially voiced vehement opposition to the South Sudan entering these sites. Today, they report crimes directly to nearby police posts and welcome their intervention. Just last week, for example, local police entered the Juba IDP camp to quell a fight between youth gangs and at the same time arrested several suspects. UNPOL is still right there alongside the National Police Service, providing support and even co-locating with them in some areas. This is all indicative of a changing context. The Independent Strategic Review commissioned by this Council, as well as our mandate review, will guide us on a course that is more fit for purpose. Protection of civilians through our peacekeepers is just one means of providing protection. More important in the long term is to create a protected environment where all citizens benefit from the rule of law. So we are looking to deploy staff and resources to build the capacity of important institutions, including the courts, the justice system, and the national police. Individual police officers will train and mentor local police. We're also looking to build on the success of the mobile courts by making them permanent, so all victims have access to justice. It means putting South Sudanese in the hot seat to tackle the impunity that has plagued this country, particularly in the area of sexual violence, so we ultimately have fewer victims. We're also prioritising technical support for security sector reform and looking ahead to the elections. Our forces in recent months have been more mobile, establishing new temporary bases and increasing patrols to hotspots. These efforts are bolstered by troops previously confined to static duties in the POC sites. Most of these initiatives are integrated. They involve, alongside our force, civil affairs and human rights staff to bring communities together, deter violence and address some of those underlying causes. Over the next 2 years, force numbers will gradually diminish by about 7% as we shift resources from troop numbers to assets that will further boost our mobility. Our intent is to do more with less. These are a few examples of our work. Of course, we're not alone in our efforts. As always, we partner with JMAC, EGAT, and the African Union, with whom we work as colleagues and share a written memorandum. Madam President, this will be my last briefing to the Security Council of SRSG as I depart next month. So I beg your indulgence to speak for a couple more minutes to share some personal reflections. At the end of my 4 years in South Sudan, I look back with a certain level of comfort about how far the country has come. There's a ceasefire, a peace deal, a transitional government, a presidency, council of ministers, and local leadership slowly being installed. The majority of people who flocked to POC sites have either left now or are living in newly transitioned IDP camps, a result of improved political security. Overall, political violence has reduced by a power of 10 compared to the number of people who are dying and displaced from widespread conflict in 2016. A caveat is our concern about the upsurge in armed community militia, seemingly in open defiance of the state forces. Unlicensed uniformed and civilian staff are making a real difference, reducing this kind of violence and bringing diverse communities together. We are a stabilising force that extends well beyond our physical presence, and which is welcomed by nearly 80% of South Sudanese whom we have independently surveyed. We also continue to push the peace process by working closely with parties in coordination with our regional and international partners. The reality is, though, that the peace process remains extremely fragile. Many citizens are wary that the political will may falter. They fear that positive progress may collapse. It is for those people that we, the international community, must remain united and committed to pushing the peace process forward. We can't sit on the sidelines as spectators. Look back 4 years. That's what failure looks like, and it's in no one's interests to return there. Madam President, there are 2 areas I want to touch on that I believe we have not confronted anywhere as well as we should have. The first is the continuing absence of a financial system that works for the people of South Sudan. The wealth of this country, from oil and elsewhere, bypasses its people, siphoned off in secrecy with no public accountability of how it is spent. Increasingly, people are asking the obvious question: why should key decision makers benefiting from their current positions hold an election that could put their access to power and resources at risk? Secondly, I'm struck by the immense pride South Sudanese have in their country. The massive UN presence will always and inevitably bump up against their hard-won sovereignty. And that word, sovereignty, is used often. But it holds deeper significance. True sovereignty means responsibility, being responsible to really care in a tangible and demonstrable way for all of the nation's 12 million citizens. It also means independence. Yet South Sudan is perhaps one of the most dependent nations in history. its education and health systems, its road and its infrastructure are provided by outsiders. And that's where I feel that we, the international community, also have responsibility. We fail to question our role and we don't acknowledge the influence of institutional pressures and ambitions on our actions. We have too eagerly stepped in and shouldered responsibilities that should be the job of the South Sudanese and have added to their dependency, and in doing so, undermined their dignity. The President has said to me several times, David, you are turning us into a nation of beggars. And he has a valid point, but it's a two-way street. This government also has to step up. State building is a finely tuned endeavour that constantly needs to be reevaluated and questioned. Madam President, I have so much admiration for the South Sudanese who I have enjoyed working alongside immensely. They are without doubt the toughest, most resilient people I have ever met. And yet, despite that hardship, they can still discuss and not give up. Perhaps above all, I've enjoyed their wonderful sense of humour, their ability to laugh in the face of huge adversity. So I will miss this young country and I wish it well from the bottom of my heart. But for me, the time is right to move on. The transformation of South Sudan from conflict to recovery is underway. The mission is in good heart, performing strongly and poised to implement change. My replacement, Nicholas Haysom, is a friend and no stranger to South Sudan, and I'm delighted he will succeed me. Because of the collective efforts of so many, and I applaud those of the region in particular, South Sudan is in a better state. It is inching forward, frustratingly slowly, but still much to do before the citizens can truly enjoy a peaceful and prosperous future. I want to thank this council, and I remember perhaps most poignantly the visit to Juba by the council members during a fragile moment of the peace process in October 2019. You were confronted by and listened to the complexities of forging peace in this country. In your actions, you swung in behind, pushed the peace process forward with the full weight of the Security Council and by extension the world. It gives us here enormous encouragement, both me personally and those I represent, and I thank you. I also thank the UN family in South Sudan for their unwavering support and hard work together with the vast number of NGOs, both national, international, who bravely and collectively have helped and saved the lives of so many, and overcome, as they went, many prejudices towards peacekeeping operations to work collaboratively with the mission. I am proud to work with some very special people in this mission, people who live in some of the toughest conditions of any UN mission on the planet, far from their loved ones. Yet every morning they get up, do their job, do their best. My last word is to the people of South Sudan, who inspire me with their seemingly endless patience and hope as they fight against huge odds to achieve a much brighter future they deserve. My thoughts and best wishes are with you always. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Shear for his briefing. I now give the floor to Ms. Jacqueline Nasiwa.
Madam President, Excellencies, good morning and warm greetings from South Sudan. I am Jacqueline Nasiwa, the founder of the Center for Inclusive Governance, Peace and Justice, a local non-governmental organization working on human rights, justice, peace building, and women's rights in South Sudan. Thank you for the opportunity to brief you today. As in many other parts of the world, the COVID-19 pandemic has devastated South Sudan. Cases are on the rise daily, crashing an already weak healthcare system that cannot meet even basic demands for services. The pandemic comes amidst a myriad of other issues. Floods in most parts of Upper Nile region, famine in Jonglei and Pibor, and continuous violation of the ceasefire by its parties, including in the cantonment sites, fighting with non-signatories to the agreement, communal violence causing loss of lives and property, sexual violence against women and girls, displacement and broader public health crisis. Our economy has collapsed due to mismanagement of our revenue and natural resources, denying citizens basic services. This is the South Sudan today. The revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan is at a risk of collapse without your unwavering support and unified stand. In the 2 years since the agreement was signed, the parties have embarked on steps that to me and many of my fellow citizens appear to be only drops in the ocean. They have taken to establish the executive of the revitalized transitional government of national unity at the state and national level, began the process of cantonment and training of the necessary unified forces for VIP protection, announced the formation of the Disarmament, Demobilization and Reintegration Commission, and drafted bills on security and governance, as well as the Constitutional Amendment Bill incorporating the peace agreement into the transitional constitution. But much more remains to be done. I am deeply concerned by the unacceptable slow pace of implementation and the lack of political will shown by the parties as my people continue to suffer on a daily basis. Our leaders must be held accountable for implementing key aspects of the peace agreement in the remainder of the transitional period. This is what our people around the country are calling for. When my colleagues and I visited local communities in parts of Upper Nile, Equatorial and Madagascar recently, this call was echoed by those we met, who demanded accountability and justice in order for peace to be realized, for civilians, for women, for children who suffered conflict-related violence, and for those who have lost loved ones and property. Ordinary civilians need security and peace. They need recognition of their plight and assurances from their leaders of never again when it comes to war. They demand an end to war, human rights violations, and corruption. Above all, they need truth and reconciliation. Close monitoring of the peace agreement framework is essential, as is completing key tasks such as the reconstitution of the state and national legislatures, establishment of the transitional justice mechanisms, adoption of the draft laws and the constitutional amendment bill on the peace agreement, operationalization of the cantonment sites, screening and training of the forces, provision of basic services to the cantonment sites, including food and medicine, and ensuring support for the disarmament and demobilization processes. Human rights must be the foundation of all these processes. Failure to uphold human rights will result in continuous inequality, division, and more violence. South Sudan is subject to a binding international framework which states that women's equal participation is both a right and a necessity for peace. However, the participation of women as provided for in the peace agreement, which calls for 35% representation, thanks to hard-won advocacy efforts by women civil society, is far from being met. The few women who have been appointed so far make up less than 20% at the national and state level. In some states, including Warab, Jonglei, Northern Barghazal, and Unity states, women representation is 11–17%. While at the county level, women make up only 2%. The parties to the agreement have ignored and excluded women leadership in key governance structures and institutions. Women have lobbied, advocated for inclusion with party leaders, but in a male-dominated society with a long history of marginalization and equality of women's rights and leadership, the fight for equality cannot be the burden of the South Sudanese women alone. The Security Council must pressure the parties to take concrete steps to ensure that the 35% quota is met at all levels of governance, and consider this in measuring progress towards implementation. When I first briefed this council in May 2018, I noted the need for UNMIS to better collaborate with civil society. I am glad to inform you that my organization and other civil society organizations are working with UNMISS to pursue grassroots peace efforts, protect human rights, and support women's leadership and peace building. However, these efforts must be expanded, and in order for it to be sustainable, requires building local capacity to continue this work. Protection of human rights defenders, particularly women defenders, is critical given the closing space and political space for civil society, media, political parties in South Sudan. For instance, civil society organizations are required to get security clearance to conduct workshops, training, and meetings on all aspects of governance, health, humanitarian support, and service delivery. Some civil society colleagues have been summoned by authorities for speaking out against corruption and the need for accountability. UNMISS must join civil society in advocating for respect for fundamental rights, such as freedom of assembly and association, and freedom of speech and access to information. UNMISS should further support human rights defenders and civil society organizations who face any intimidation for carrying out their essential work. Madam President, Excellencies, we thank you for the humanitarian support the international community has extended so far. But peace and stability are the only assurance of the future of our communities. To date, 11 South Sudanese women have briefed this council who are tired of sharing the same stories of war, trauma, and loss. Having visited many of the affected communities, I can personally attest that after enduring decades of conflict, the resilience of my fellow South Sudanese is fading. Although ours is a history of struggle for liberty, freedom, prosperity, and dignity, we can struggle no more. We have endured endless trauma, losing our children and loved ones, being displaced from our homes, dying from hunger and diseases, and witnessing the impunity with which rape and other horrific acts have been committed under the watch of this council and its members. To expect the South Sudanese to remain resilient in the face of such trauma is unacceptable. We need this council to act now, before even worse happens. Peace be with us all. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Nasiwa for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of Vietnam.
I thank you, Madam President. So since its first open meeting of the Council, I would like to extend our thanks and appreciation to Ambassador Barbara Woodward and her team for excellent presidency in February. And our warmest congratulations and best wishes to you, Madam President, and your term in this month presidency. You have our full support, Madam. I would like to thank SICKly David Shearer and Ms. Jacqueline Nasiwa for their statement. Madam President, since beginning of the year 2021, further progress has been achieved in South Sudan. The appointment of Governor of Upper Nile in January completed the formation of global national governmentarian position in all states of South Sudan after 6-month effort. The transitional government is functioning. The permanent ceasefire continues to be largely upheld. We also welcome the government proposal to approval to establish the African Union hybrid court. It is also encouraging that, according to the International Monetary Fund, South Sudan economy experienced positive growth in 2020 despite the challenges of COVID-19 pandemic. While the progress is so far encouraging, we know that the implementation of the 2018 peace agreement is overall still remain limited. South Sudan continues to face the burden of the COVID-19 pandemic, heavily floods and other natural disasters. Intercommunal violence and food insecurity continue to be issues of great concerns. These can threaten the recent positive achievement. In this regard, I wish to highlight the following 4 points. First, we reiterate our call to South Sudanese Party to step up the implementation of peace agreement, particularly in finalizing 2 key provisions. reconstitution of the Transitional National Legislative Assembly, and formation of the necessary unified forces. We applaud the high female representation in several federal and local agencies, which has met the 35% goal. We reaffirm our support for further women participation and leadership in the transitional process and beyond. We welcome the continued effort of UNMISS, the EU and IGOD, and other international partners in promoting the implementation of peace agreement, and we further encourage IGOD to increase its mediation efforts during this critical period. More confidence building measures should also be taken into account to promote trust and reconciliation. Second, it is imperative to ensure that the permanent ceasefire continue to be upheld. In addition, we call on the government to put in more efforts to address inter-communal violence in the country to prevent possible adverse impact on the current transitional period. We commend the role of UNMISS in the protection of civilians. In the face of COVID-19 pandemic, it is encouraging that the mission is striving to extend its protection of civilians out of the POC site. Vietnam will continue to actively contribute to the work of UNMISS and promote the participation of our female peacekeepers in the mission. Third, more efforts are needed to tackle the economic and humanitarian challenges in the country. While the country experiences positive economic growth, it is concerning that the high level of food insecurity continues to affect more than half of the population. We hope the international community will strengthen its humanitarian assistance and financial support to South Sudan, as well as providing further assistance to the country in combating COVID-19. Vietnam will provide medical support to South Sudan in the fight against the pandemic within our capacity. Fourth, Vietnam reiterates our consistent position that sanction measures are subjected to review in accordance with the development on the ground and shall be removed when the conditions are met. We look forward to receiving the report of Secretariat on the proposal of the benchmark to review the arms embargo, and will actively engage with Council members on the establishment of the such benchmark. And as the chair of the 20OC committee, Vietnam will also continue to foster cooperation and dialogue between the panel of experts and South Sudan and regional states. Before concluding, as this meeting is expected to be Mr. Shearer's last briefing to the Security Council and the Special Representative of Secretary General for South Sudan, I would like to commend his leadership of UNMISS and his tireless effort in promoting peace and development in the country throughout the past years. I congratulate Mr. Nicola Haysom for his appointment as the incoming SISG for South Sudan and look forward to actively supporting him. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Vietnam for his statement. I shall now give the floor to the representative of Kenya.
Madam President, colleagues, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3+1, Kenya, Niger, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Tunisia. Let me begin by expressing our gratitude to the Secretary General for the comprehensive report, as well as the SRSG for South Sudan and Head of UNMISS, Mr. David Shearer, for his insightful briefing. We commend SRSG Shearer for the outstanding work during his tenure at the helm of UNMISS that saw the mission make significant contribution to the South Sudan peace process and overall stabilization efforts. We congratulate Mr. Nicholas Haysom on his appointment as SRSG for South Sudan and Head of UNMISS. We wish him success and look forward to supporting his work. Madam President, the A3+1 welcomes the overall improvement of the political and security situation in South Sudan, demonstrated, among others, by the collegiality among the leadership of the parties, the gradual implementation of the revitalized peace agreement, the more than 2.5 years holding of the permanent ceasefire, and the transition of the UN protection of civilian sites to camps of internally displaced persons under the responsibility of the government of South Sudan. It is notable that the implementation of the revitalized peace agreement has been incremental, with the recent significant breakthroughs being the establishment of the transitional governance institutions at the national and state level, and the completion of the appointment of state governors and deputy governors, as well as other state-level officials. Despite this progress, however, the implementation of some activities on governance continue to fall behind schedule. In particular, the reconstitution of the transitional national legislature. We therefore urge the parties to expeditiously finalize the ongoing appointments of state officials and reconstitute the transitional national legislature. We also urge the parties to remain committed to the principle of inclusivity, including the implementation of the agreed minimum of 35% quota for women participation, as well as youth engagement. These are necessary to create the fundamental political and security foundations for the transition period. Madam President, it is encouraging that the overall security situation in the country continues to improve as the parties observe the permanent ceasefire. We commend the government for the measures taken to address the low-level, localized, and ethnic conflicts that have been reported from time to time. We appreciate that this is work in progress and more remains to be done to address the root causes. The A3+1 also notes with concern the slow progress of the implementation of transitional security arrangements as stipulated under Chapter 2 of the revitalized peace agreement. This slow process is largely attributable to the lack of technical capacity and limited resources. In this regard, we welcome efforts to facilitate capacity building in the security sector, including the training on leadership, peace building, and reconstruction held in Nairobi, Kenya, targeting senior officers of the South Sudan People's Defense Forces and opposition commanders. We reiterate that the overall stability of South Sudan can only be guaranteed through a comprehensive improvement of the security sector. We therefore call upon the parties to expedite the ongoing process of cantonment, selection, training, and deployment of the necessary unified forces. The A3+1 also takes note of the progress made under the Rome Initiative of the South Sudan peace process and convey our appreciation to the community of Sant Egidio for its contribution and facilitation. We urge the parties to remain committed to the Rome process in the spirit of dialogue and compromise. It is critical that the non-signatory parties join the transition process without further delay and actively participate in its implementation. We also call on all parties to honor their commitments on the cessation of hostilities and make every effort to expeditiously conclude the ongoing discussions. Madam President, important lessons have been learned during the last 2.5 years of the implementation of the revitalized peace agreement. There is no doubt that this is a complex and costly arrangement which will require an investment of a significant amount of time and resources. For instance, the current report of the Secretary General notes that critical institutions for the implementation of the peace process, such as the National Constitution Amendment Committee, cannot proceed because of the funding gap. In light of these challenges, we wish to underscore the imperative for continued regional and international support towards the implementation of the South Sudan peace process, including through robust diplomatic and political engagement, technical assistance, and financial and logistical assistance. Of critical importance in this regard will be the implementation of the transitional security arrangements and capacity building of the justice and rule of law, as well as public administration sectors. Madam President, we can never overemphasize the important role of UNMISS in supporting the people of South Sudan to lay a firm foundation for the achievement of peace, stability, and development. In this regard, the A3+1 welcomes the report of UNMISS Independent Strategic Review. This report will be critical in informing the upcoming review of the UNMISS mandate with a view to making the mission more fit for purpose. The expectations of the people of South Sudan and the region is that the new UNMISS mandate should be calibrated to respond to the evolving political and security situation, with a particular focus on giving concrete support to the peace process, including technical and logistical support for mechanisms and institutions responsible for the implementation of the revitalized peace agreement. In this regard, we wish to emphasize the following. A, the fragility of South Sudan demands that the peace process be complemented by a robust peace-building program. Some of the elements to guide this effort are within the provisions of the revitalized peace agreement and could be easily implemented with little support. UNMISS should be mandated and capacitated to support such programs that include elements of transitional security arrangements. State formation and institutional building in South Sudan remains a work in progress. This is what informed the establishment of UNMISS on 8 July 2011. The Council should reflect on the founding mandate to inform the future trajectory of the activities of the mission, including in consolidation of peace and security, creating conditions for development, and strengthening the institutional capacity of the government. Such a focus will be instrumental in helping South Sudan develop the institutional capacity to govern effectively and respond to the challenges of accountability on human rights, resource management, and other areas of public services. Madam President, the recent improvements in the political and security situation makes it opportune for this Council to evaluate the efficacy of sanctions imposed on South Sudan. The A3+1 welcomes the ongoing exercise for elaboration of well-identified benchmarks that would guide the reviewing of those measures. We therefore call for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound targets which could be easily assessed against the progress achieved. It is fitting that we continue to recognize the vital role played by South Sudan's neighbors and Africa in the difficult path to achieving ceasefire and compromise with peace building. In particular, we note the sustained efforts by the IGAD heads of state and ministers in bringing the warring parties together to achieve a political settlement. In this period of instability in other parts of the region, we recommend all conflicting parties to consider the record set in the South Sudan's peace process as a resource audit. To conclude, the A3+1 reiterates its appreciation for the continued efforts of the UN, AU, IGAD, and all international partners in supporting the people of South Sudan in their quest for peace, stability, and prosperity. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Kenya for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Mexico.
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam President. We are once again grateful to the UK for their successful presidency of the Council in February, and I reiterate to you, Madam President, my delegation's full support for your presidency. I would like to thank SRSG Shearer for his report on the work of UNMISS and on the situation in South Sudan. We recognize Mr. Shearer's work and leadership over the more than 4 years at the helm of the mission, and we wish him all the best in his future endeavors. I would also like to thank Ms. Nasiwa for her presentation about issues about the importance of including women in her country's public life. Mexico is following with cautious optimism the progress made in the South Sudanese political process, including when it comes to the formation of state governments, the recent appointments made by President Kiir in the regions of Northern Bahr el Ghazal, Western Equatoria, Jonglei, and Warab. These are in addition to the appointment of the governor of the Upper Nile region. Although it is slow, the implementation of some chapters of the revitalized agreement is nevertheless encouraging. This solidifies the state's governance. In this regard, Mexico calls for the full participation of women in the peace process to be guaranteed. They must also be represented at all levels of decision-making. This to fulfill the 35% quota and other gender provisions laid out in the agreement. While we welcome the reduction in the clashes as a result of political differences, we nevertheless regret the notable increase in the number of attacks on civilians, including attacks on children. The report from UNMISS states that in 2020 there was a 120% increase in the number of attacks on civilians in comparison with the previous year. In this context, we are closely following the transfer of responsibilities over Centers for the Protection of Civilians from UNMISS to the government of South Sudan. Mexico reiterates the importance of addressing the factors that foster conflict and disproportionately affect civilians. Once again, we can see how the illegal flow of small arms and light weapons invariably perpetuates cycles of violence. That is why we call for the weapons collection program to be given priority. Comprehensive strategies for coordination must also be made effective and implemented to deal with arms trafficking, both for South Sudan and indeed for the entire region. Any review of the arms embargo must be carried out with due regard for the situation on the ground and the capacity to manage unrestricted flows of weapons. We welcome the announcement of the Joint Action Plan on Sexual Violence in Conflict, as well as the decision by the court in Yei last September that convicted 26 soldiers of the South Sudanese armed forces on crimes of sexual violence. We underscore the appalling plight of women and girls who remain victims of rape, sexual slavery, and forced marriage, among other kinds of unacceptable violence. Mexico condemns these practices in the strongest possible terms. We do hope that the implementation of Chapter 5 of the agreement will allow for full accountability, compensation, and fundamental redress, which are so crucial for the reconstruction of the social fabric. The humanitarian situation is serious. In just 1 year, the number of people requiring aid has increased by 800,000. The total is now 8.3 million. The floods that assailed the Jonglei region aggravate a food insecurity situation that was already there, and it now affects almost half of the population. Insecurity and violence escalate the internal displacement of people. There are now more than 1.6 million IDPs. Mexico calls for safe access and free movement of humanitarian personnel to be guaranteed as they go about their critical work. This must be done in strict adherence to international law and international humanitarian law. Madam President, finally, Mexico calls for UNMISS to be able to continue fulfilling its mandate. The mission must be able to enjoy complete freedom of movement and guarantees as it goes about its work. Reports of continued violations of the agreement on the status of the forces from the government add an unnecessary additional difficulty to the mission's work, the mission that is already operating in a very complex environment. Finally, I reiterate my country's availability to work constructively to achieve the renewal of UNMISS's mandate so that it can respond increasingly effectively to the reality of the needs of South Sudan. Thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Mexico for his statement. I give the floor to the representative.
Thank you, Madam President. At outset, I congratulate the U.S. on assuming the presidency of the Council this month. I expect that under your leadership, the Council will successfully complete the work on its agenda this month. I also thank the United Kingdom for the great deal of work during its presidency of February. China wishes to thank Special Representative Shearer for his briefing. Mr. Shearer, since assuming the post as Special Representative, has actively fulfilled the mandate of the Security Council and made a significant contribution to promoting the political process, protecting the safety and security of the people and assisting humanitarian relief. China wishes to register its appreciation. I also will give him best wishes for his future endeavor. I also listened attentively to the statement made by Ms. Nasiba. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the founding of South Sudan. Over the past 10 years, the people of South Sudan have overcome numerous challenges and have made new progress in nation building. At present, the situation in South Sudan presents both opportunities and challenges. All parties in the country should redouble their efforts, and the international community should continue to provide constructive assistance. I wish to highlight the following. First, there is a need to maintain the positive momentum of the political process. For some time now, the ceasefire in South Sudan has been holding on the whole. And implementation of the revitalized agreement has made positive progress on key issues such as government formation and appointment of governors. China welcomes this
ventilation problem.
We encourage all parties in South Sudan to consolidate existing gains, move forward the key tasks of security arrangements, the reconstruction, and the preparation for general elections, stay the course of implementing the agreement, and resolve potential differences by peaceful means. We call on the armed factions that have not yet joined the agreement to do so as soon as possible. The implementation of the agreement faces practical difficulties such as lack of funding. We hope that the international community will provide responsive assistance. The African Union, regional organizations such as IGAD, and countries such as the Sudan have made significant contribution to the implementation of the agreement, and their efforts should continue to be supported by the international community. China calls on the international community to respond to the AU's initiative and lift sanctions against South Sudan as soon as possible. Second, it is necessary to continue the security situation improvement. Communal and ethnic conflicts continue to pose a security threat to the people of South Sudan, and requires a combination of responses such as prevention, mediation, reconciliation, and protection. UNMISS has devoted considerable efforts to this end, with some success. The government of South Sudan bears primary responsibility for protecting civilians. China supports the international community in continuing to provide capacity building assistance to the government of South Sudan in this regard. Competing for resources remains a major cause of communal and ethnic conflict. Developing economy and improving people's livelihood can help eliminate the root causes of conflict, and special attention should be paid to this point. Third, it is necessary to assist in responding to challenges such as COVID-19. The COVID-19 infection rate in South Sudan is reported to be as high as 15 to 25%, which is worrying. The immediate priority is to provide anti-COVID-19 support to South Sudan, ensure timely and fair access to the COVID-19 vaccine for those in need, and curb the spread of the pandemic. South Sudan is experiencing severe economic difficulties, and more than 8 million people may need humanitarian assistance this year. The international community should step up its support and assistance in this regard. China has all along actively supporting South Sudan's economic and social development. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, China has provided several batches of anti-pandemic materials and humanitarian assistance to South Sudan and has decided to donate COVID-19 vaccine to the country. While Chinese remain on the ground, additional teams of medical experts. These female peacekeepers are also actively involved in providing medical help to local people. UNMISS
Remember, I got all day to fucking
has done a great deal
you fucking goof. What did you just fucking do?
To the health of peacekeepers and affects the normal performance of UNMISS. And this situation warrants China has decided to donate COVID-19 vaccine. Continued. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, President. And again, let me warmly welcome you and reiterate our full support for your presidency. Many thanks also to SRC Chair for his briefing. Outstanding service to the UN and to South Sudan.